everybody, it's Zazu Cioce here with your movement minute for today. We are going to focus on the pectoralis major, or that big chest muscle that you have today, and trying to basically loosen up and get some more mobility out of that big muscle in our chest. So how this might be relevant in general is going to be, right, if you are doing a lot of chest exercises, push-ups, those types of exercises, those are all going to be using a lot of your chest muscles. So this would be really great if you are exercising with, that specific muscle group in mind. So another thing that makes it very relevant for this point in time is the sitting environments that we are in for work and even for life sometimes. So when we are sitting for extended periods of time, most of us tend to kind of roll our shoulders forward, and what that ends up doing is that ends up shortening or tightening the pec muscles. So to be clear, we're going to focus on pec major today. You do have another pec muscle called your pec minor, but we're going to focus on the big guy today. But not to say that pec minor isn't important, because it is, but we're just going to focus on the larger muscle because that's all we have time for today. So we are going to do a little bit of mobility work, and I want to show you where we're going to target that. Today, you are going to be creative, and if you have a foam roller and a ball, that's going to be what you're going to use. If you don't have a foam roller, get creative. You can use a ball on a wall or a ball on the floor, which is how most people will kind of try to access the pecs and get some mobility in through there. But today we're going to be extra creative and pair the foam roller and the ball together, because those are a lot of things that we do tend to have around the house if you are used to exercising. So we're going to head over to Steve, and I'm just going to show you where we're going to target today. Okay, so we have the pec muscle all along, you can see along the sternum and along the clavicle. So about mid-clavicle to the sternum, all the way down to the sternum, and actually also along the cartilages of the first 6 ribs. And that's where we're going to do a lot of the work today. So the pec major also, maybe not obviously, but it inserts into the shoulder area as well. So we're going to start with placing the ball kind of right where the tendon is, which is going to be more in front of the shoulder joint itself, and then we're going to walk it along the clavicle, down the sternum, and then we're also going to hit it from the side and see if we can kind of get underneath that pec muscle. In women, obviously, we have larger breasts, so we're going to have to work underneath that breast tissue, versus men can kind of put their hand right on there and just kind of work with what they have. So get creative either way, do what feels good to you, and let's get started. Okay, so we've got the foam roller, and I have a mobility ball here that is a little bit bigger in size. Again, similar to other videos where I've talked about mobility tools, the smaller the ball, the more focused and more specific you're going to be with your mobility work. The larger the ball, the more global you're going to be with your mobility work. But also, the larger the ball, the more comfortable it tends to feel, versus the smaller the ball, the more intense it tends to feel. So for this area, most of us tend to be definitely tight through here just because of our postures throughout the day, as well as any type of physical exercise that we're doing with this area. So I'm going to go with the bigger ball. And if you're even luckier to have a mobility ball that has some vibration in it, like this one, you can work some vibration in it at the same time as the mobility work, which just takes it to a whole nother level. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the ball kind of on top of the foam roller here. So you see how it holds it nicely. So now you're gonna take it down to the ground, because we're gonna put this foam roller on the ground, and then we're gonna wedge the ball into the areas that I talked about. So that way we are controlling how much pressure we're putting through to that muscle using the mobility tool. But also you can really vary up your position a lot easier doing this method than just kind of putting the ball on the floor and then laying on it. It definitely is a little bit more difficult that way. This is a really nice way to be able to get in at different angles and do different things, which leads to just better mobility. So let's go to the ground. Okay, so I'm gonna put the foam roller on the ground, and remember we're gonna do, you want to do both sides. I'm gonna show you on one side, but definitely when you're at home, you'll wanna do both sides. So again, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start closer to the shoulder joint. You're gonna find your clavicle and then kind of come down to just the inside of the shoulder joint. So that's actually a little bit closer to the tendon of the pec major, but also it's a little bit closer to your pec minor. So you are getting a little bit of pec minor in there, but we're not really focusing there today. All right, so then you're gonna kneel down and kind of get the ball into that position. So what I really like to do is I like to have a hand on the ball, and then just to start, another one on the foam roller, and you're almost gonna kind of twist the ball so that you're almost catching the skin and taking up the slack in that area of the tissue. So it's almost, again, like you're just kind of almost like just turning the ball into that skin, getting the slack into that tissue, and then you're pushing through to get some deeper penetration into that muscle. So on top of that, so now that we've got that kind of slack taken up, we're getting pressure through that area, now we're gonna add some actual range of motion to it. So I want you to kind of play with this and see what feels good to you, but generally you can kind of start with just kind of going forward and back, and you should kind of feel you're getting some movement in that area. So then also kind of work with some rotation and just see what happens. If you find any ugly spots or spots that don't feel very good, that probably means you need to work in that area and keep doing whatever you're doing. Obviously, to your tolerance, you don't want to have a lot of pain, but some discomfort is a good indicator that you're in the right spot. So I'm working with rotation. The further I get back, the more it gets ugly for me. So now that I'm found pretty much a position that feels like it needs a little bit of work, I'm gonna take some deep breaths here. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. Remember, make your exhale longer than your inhale. And if you get to a point where you find an ugly spot and you can't take a deep breath in or out, that means back off with the pressure or come back to a position that you tolerate a little bit better, because you're pushing it a little too far in that case. All right, so again, you can kind of come out to the side. You can kind of come up a little bit, play with the angles, come back, get some rotation in through there. All right, that's pretty good. So now we're gonna continue to find the clavicle, and then we're gonna move it kind of to the mid clavicle, just underneath there. So again, kind of get some good pressure, turn it so that you can kind of take up some of that slack of the tissue there, get some pressure through, and then again, start adding some mobility. And again, you're feeling for what feels specifically tight or ugly for you. This is gonna look different for everybody, and that's okay, because it's gonna be dependent on what your postures are like throughout the day, what your workout or exercise is like throughout the day. Remember to take a nice big deep breaths. once you find those ugly spots. All right, so then what we're gonna do is, now that we just did the mid-clavicle kind of right underneath there, we're gonna keep going towards the sternum or the breastbone. And once you get there, you're gonna kind of come down a little bit. Maybe about, so you've got like the top of your sternum here. So come down a few inches and off to the side, because remember, those pecs attach to that area. Same deal. You're gonna target the ball right there. So this is probably going to be one of the more uncomfortable positions, just because you're now kind of mobilizing an area that is really close to the breastbone, which doesn't have a lot of meat on top of it. So unless you have a really big chest and have really big pecs, then that's going to be different for you. But for me, I don't. So I am definitely feeling it a little bit more intense because there's just less tissue there between the bone and where the ball is. But same deal. So I'm almost even just rotating and getting in the slack in right here. And as I'm doing that, my shoulder's rotating with it. And so I'm getting some motion through there. But if I wanted to be really more intense with my actual arm motion, kind of get into the position, get the pressure that feels good to me, and then again, start working with that rotation. Come behind, come forward, come out. So the pec muscle has different lines of pull for the different lines of muscle that, with the attachments along the sternum and the clavicle, and even the first 1 through 6 ribs along the cartilage in the front. So getting all sorts of movements important because it's a big muscle and it actually does quite a lot. Okay, and so the last tidbit is going to be the trickier part, which is really not that tricky. You just have to, you'll know when you're on it, but you're gonna try to get it from the side. So like I said, in males, it's gonna be a little bit easier just because you don't have the extra breast tissue on top, most likely. But for women, if you kind of find the front part of your armpit and you come down a little bit, and if you just think about just flexing your chest, when you do that, you should feel that muscle kind of pop into your finger. And so you can kind of see side, that's kind of where I'm at. Once you do that and you feel that muscle pop into your finger, guess what? That's where you're going. And for guys, same deal. You're gonna kind of try to come at it from the lateral, almost lateral and front. And again, kind of taking up the slack. And yeah, that does not feel nice. But that's good because that means I found a spot that could really use it. Okay, so try that out. Let me know how it goes and hope you guys have a good rest of your day.